What lurks behind this unassuming storefronts in Cleveland, Ohio? It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic. Learn the history of Wicca and the tale of those who brought it to the United States. See the tools of magic, once used by practitioners of the arcane arts. It's the Buckland Museum of Witchcraft and Magic.
Welcome back to the Buckland Museum Frankenstein radio controls, emitting out of a hidden cave in a forgotten part of the city of Cleveland. Today, we're going to have a return guest with Jason Mankey, author of numerous books on witchcraft, most recently, The Horned God of the Witches. But first, a little bit of business. Hey, you want to come to the museum? That's fantastic. Don't forget to order your tickets on our website, bucklandmuseum.org. A lot of people are forgetting that, that's how we switch to things now. So this is how it happened. Pandemic happened. I thought, you know what, let's do ticket appointment. Turns out really good. People like the tours better. People come in, they get to enjoy the stuff. We get to talk about the collection in a much more organized manner. Where before the pandemic it was just like, everybody in, let's have a good time. So please order your tickets on our website, bucklandmuseum.org. There's nothing that breaks my heart more than telling people that they can't see the collection. Don't show up without a ticket. Okay, so another piece of business is we have a new t-shirt design. We have a new Baphomet t-shirt. So the thing about this t-shirt is it's very limited. We're selling tickets, we're selling our t-shirt sign on bucklandmuseum.org. Go to the part where it says shop, and you can order one. I'm probably about halfway through them. So if you want a Baphomet t-shirt, get it now. Baphomet. I don't know. I guess we're going to talk to Jason, whether that's a horned god or not. Feel free to put your opinions about this in our comments. Okay. Currently on display in our rotating exhibit space, we have a show going on currently called Beyond the Veil. It's a photo show of photographs by Julie K. Gray. She had a near-death experience about 14 years ago, and I think you'll really enjoy the way that she processes it. We threw in some ephemera from our friend Timothy Shaw, Spiritualist Ephemera, and what we have is a really great show. Also, Beyond the Jesse Bransford Time Machines, 1997-2021. 24 years of cult art through our friend Jesse Bransford, who a lot of people know from painting the magic circle in our museum. Okay, so with no further ado, Jason Mankey.
Thank you. It's always good to be back. You have the best intro, like in all of the world of witchcraft broadcasting. I love the intro. It makes me excited to be here.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like you're going into like a cave, right? It's like you're going to perform that ritual. It's music by my friend Jesse out in Long Island. And, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
It also kind of evokes a 70s occult vibe. And I miss that vibe so much.
That's my vibe.
Yeah, I love that vibe.
And that comes in here. We have a section in the museum. I call it the 6660s division, but it's really in many ways the 7770s division. So yeah, that is totally my jam.
I was reading once that scholars sometimes say the 60s lasted from 1965 to 1975, right? So 666, 777, yeah, it's all right there.
Yeah, it's always like kind of nebulous when the times are. So we have a comment from our friend Kelvin Frazier. Good evening, Kelvin. Good evening.
Good evening.
And then let's see, Leslie Ann Brewster says, looks like a shop. looks freaked out. Well, Leslie, the front is a shop, a small gift shop. In the back, it's artifacts of the arcane. Come see the museum sometime, and we can talk about that. It's
so perfect
for the museum.
So perfectly, poetic too. Artifacts of the arcane. I love it.
There's some alliteration there.
I love it.
So, Jason, we are here to talk about something that I sell in our shop.
Yay.
The Horned God of the Witches, your new book.
Yay.
Congratulations. I actually had the opportunity to read this a few months ago, so I'm kind of fuzzy on some of the details, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I think it's a great companion to the classic other book about this sort of thing, The Witch's God, by Janet and Stuart Farrar. But this covers a lot more bases that I really quite enjoyed. So can you tell me a little bit, why did you decide that there needed to be another Horned God book?
I think I wanted to write it because I didn't really think there was a Horned God book. So something like the Farrar's Witch's God is about like sun gods. I think there's a great chapter in there called the Widower God, about Yahweh being divorced from his wife. There's a large amount of different sort of deities in there. And this book is just all horned and antlered god stuff. So it's really focused that way. It's the first book I ever really wanted to write about witchcraft. And I tried to write it when I was younger and submitted some early chapters in 2005 to Llewellyn. And wow, I was not a good writer then. So they did not pick it up. And after that, I was like, I'm never going to do this again. I'm done. I'll write about other shit. And then I was in my shower where I have all the best ideas. And I just felt like, whoa, I think I can do this. Maybe if I do X and X and X and X, I can write this book and it won't be crappy this time and they'll accept it. And I jumped out of the shower and didn't dry off and started typing while nude, of course. And there you go. And then I sent it in like the next day. And after some pleading, they decided to publish it. But I felt kind of called to do it because I feel like sometimes the Horned God gets sort of lost in the witchcraft world. And really, if you look at the history of witchcraft, the Horned God is kind of there the whole time, especially, beginning by the late Middle Ages, early modern period. Anytime you have witches being talked about, there is a horned deity. Now, is that horned deity sometimes called the devil? Yes, but it's still horned, right? And people associate Old Horny with witches, and I never really felt like he quite got his due. So that's why I wanted to write this book.
So I let's face it, doing what I do here, I do have stalkers. And one thing I always try to explain to them is, nobody's on my shoulder telling me to do bad things. Mm-hmm. I always say, when I jaywalk, that's my own poor decision making. Like nobody's whispering in my ear, being like, "Ooh, go jaywalk," And I think that's the complete, the biggest problem that I have when they tell me about how it's Satan. It's nobody's influencing me to do this. When I make my poor decisions, it's all on me. What about you, Jason? Do you feel that way?
Of course, it's all my decision. But I mean, you go back and you look at woodcuts in the early modern period. We probably think of it as earlier than that, but when you see those pictures of witches with the devil and the woodcuts, and they're all kind of classic, they're supposed to scare you, and instead the witches look like they're having like the best time, right? They're singing, dancing, eating, doing like fun shit, and the devil figure looks so happy to be there, and I don't understand what you're supposed to be terrified of, right? Like, to me, the stained glass in churches, like if dudes dying on crosses and stuff, is much more terrifying than people in a circle dancing. I'd much rather be in a circle dancing and doing stuff. Yeah.
The witches do know how to have a good time.
Witches know how to party.
Yeah. So, when was your first time? So, I know that you've been interested in witchcraft for many, many years, but did you have a moment where the Horned God came to you, where you realized? Because let's face it, with a lot of the text, a lot of it is goddess. Goddess.
Yeah. So for me, I got into witchcraft because of the goddess. I was like really into goddess worship. That was sort of my focus. Did not really want to do anything with the horned god. Kind of pushed that off to the side pretty hard. And then after a few years, though, I just began to feel this sort of calling and this yearning. This sounds really dumb, and I apologize in advance, but I lived in a house when we had like these scrubby bushes in the front of the house, and I used to walk up our stairs past these bushes, and I swear that I would see Pan like smiling in the bushes, right? Like,
Yeah.
let me in your house, let me in your life. And at a ritual once, I just sort of yelled his name, and I kind of felt like his power come through me. So before I knew sort of the bigger horn god, it was Pan first and foremost for me in my mind and in my practice and in my heart. And that's the first horn god I ever met. But it took a couple years because I really wanted nothing to do with the horned god. And then it kind of became my primary obsession. Whiskey, the horned god, yeah, probably, but in reverse order.
So when I was a kid, well, not a kid, well, yeah, I was in eighth grade for my English class. We were covering like the Greek myths. And we had to dress up like a god. And who did I choose? I chose Pan. And my parents, they moved out of their house, my childhood home, a couple of years ago. And just going through just the remnants of my childhood, I found part of my Pan costume. And it was pretty ingenious. My mother had made horns out of the same material that she had made my leggings, my goat legs out of. And these, I must have been quite a sight, you know. But I think at that moment was when I realized Pan was like part of my whole zone and my headspace. So.
Yeah, and he's really insistent. And when he wants you, you will find him. You know, he will find you, and you usually don't have much choice in the matter. Pan costumes are hard too because you got to get those hooves right? And to do that, you got to like stand on your tiptoes the whole time while you walk around.
It was sophisticated compared to like just the people that wore togas, but really not that sophisticated. I think it kind of looked like more that I had like I don't know, puffy pants that were furry. So Kelvin says, did you cover Baphomet in the book?
I don't know.
I think there's only a couple. Move it to there we go.
Yeah. He has a small entry in the book. It's not a particularly big entry, but it sort of traces the history of the word Baphomet, which comes from Muhammad. And you originally just sort of meant head, and then Eliphas Levi, and what Baphomet means. It's probably the most misunderstood image in Western occultism, and maybe in the greater world, because when people do like Satan pictures, they love to show Baphomet for whatever reason. You know, it's a primary ever since it was first published in the 19th century.
I mad respect to the Satanic Temple, but I always think it's kind of weird that they essentially chose a Baphomet to be their depiction of the horned god.
The more that I see Baphomet, the more I love that image. I mean, Baphomet really just kind of means everything or all. That's kind of what they're trying to do with what Levi was trying to do with Baphomet. He's representing the entire world, everybody who's on it, which is why it has sort of those both male and female features, and wings and horns and hooves. It's everything. It's the best. Yeah,
dissolved and put together, right? Coagula himself. So Rachel says, right, the cross brings so much fear. Yeah, it does. I mean, it just seems like a really basic version of an Ankh. It's like we took something cool and made it even more. Almost forgot. Nice Queen shirt. Kelvin, showing your Queen shirt. And Rachel says, Hail Pan. That's right. I-O Pan. I just love that Jack Parsons would recite the I-O Pan poem before he blew off his rockets. All his friends would say, yeah, that guy's weird, but man, do his rockets fly. Which,
There's Crowley's Hymn to Pan is like one of his best pieces of poetry, too. It just has this really weird cadence to it, and it's easy to get caught up in. And one of the great things about Hymn to Pan too is it captures sort of a different aspect of Pan than a lot of other poetry captures.
I just the other day, the first thing I came into in the museum was flip open my copy of Magic and Theory and Practice. And right here we start with Hymn to Pan. And that's how I started my morning the other day. Thrilled with lioesome lust of the light. Oh man, my man. Come careening out of the night. Oh, Pan.
Yeah, one of the best things about Crowley's work now being in the public domain is I was able to put the whole poem in this book, because you couldn't have done that 6 years ago.
Yeah. Much to, I'm sure, copyright holders' chagrin. So, Jason, what makes a horned god?
That's a really good question. I mean, obviously, the first thing you think of are horns, but really, the most common image today of the horned god is of an antlered deity, especially kind of images based on the Gallic Celtic Kernonos.
But are horns antlers?
They're very, very different. Horns are permanent structures on top of a head. Antlers are shed annually. So they mean very different things. Like when people were first doing burials, sometimes people would be buried clutching antlers because antlers represented rebirth and growth, because they annually fell to the ground and then annually grew back on top of heads. So they're very, very different. They mean very, very different things. But I think horned god rolls off the tongue better than antlered god.
Antlered god is a
Yeah. It's also a term that Margaret Murray used. And later Gerald Gardner and other writers used the term horned god. They didn't use the term horned or antlered god or antlered god. So that's kind of just what we use. So, I mean, that's the big one, of course. A lot of times today, people think of the horned god, they think of the erect phallus because of Pan. And even in deities like Kernonos, who weren't depicted that way in antiquity, you'll often still see them in modern depictions with like the raging boner. And that's not completely accurate. However, it's, I guess, one of the things that we associate most with the horned god. Sometimes we associate dying and resurrecting, dying and rising gods, especially if you think of a lot of rituals in the fall. You know, there's always those rituals where the god dies, and sometimes that god is shown as being horned. But it's really sort of an open thing. My thought is, if it's a god of nature, if it's a god of wild spaces, if it's a god of lust and pleasure, and it has, or even doesn't have antlers or horns on top of its head, it's probably a horned god. I mean, it's really a judgment call that we all have to make.
So, would you consider Moses a horned god?
I'd consider him a Jewish guy.
Okay, but well,
no.
But, you know, there's all the depictions of like Moses with like horns. So
there are, but I mean, he doesn't fit anything else really with the horned god idea. You know, most of the horned gods love earth. They love earthy things. They love physical things. You know, if you think of like being outside in nature, that's kind of a very physical thing. If you think about sex, that's a very physical thing. And you don't kind of get that with figures like Moses, right? They're not.
No, probably not.
Yeah. I think of Dionysus as a horned god. Dionysus was often represented by a bull, which obviously has horns. And he was a very lusty god in his own way. And he was very much a god of the people. He's one of the few Greek gods that lived on Earth for a short period of time. I mean, Zeus didn't really do that. Hermes didn't really do that. So that made him very different. And so in the book, I list Dionysus as a horned god.
So, just a weird thought. John Dee's monad. Is that a horned god?
If you think it is.
I never thought about that before whatsoever. Like, but just while you're talking, yeah. So, Tony, it says, Jason, good to see you. Question. Do you feel more of a connection to Pan or Cernunnos?
So Pan was my first. You know, you always love your first, probably. And Cernunnos was my second. They're different. I can't really say that I like one more than the other. There are 3 deities who have paintings up in our ritual, 3 male deities who have paintings up in our ritual space. Those are Pan, Dionysus, and Cernunnos. That tells you all you need to know about who my 3 favorite deities are when it comes to the horned god. But I can't really say one is better than the other. They're different, and we do different things. Like I have a lot of different friends. Like a lot of my witch friends aren't going to go watch the NBA Eastern Conference Finals with me tomorrow, but I have other friends who will, and they're all friends. So I don't choose one or the other. They come like I am closer to certain ones at certain times of year. To me, Cernunnos is a god of the realms of death, and so for me, Cernunnos is very much a god I associate with Samhain and the fall and the winter.
Which is another thing that I want to get into here is so this is one of the most complex questions that I ever get from people are things about the horned god and the goddess, the Wiccan wheel of the year. Okay? So we begin at Samhain, Halloween, and then we go to Beltane, May Day. This is the time of the horned god. And then from May Day to Samhain, the time of the goddess. But then, well, all right, so the horned god, a lot of times, the sun. Well, there's more sun in summer. I don't know where you live, but there's more sun in summer, okay? And then midsummer, well, happy solstice. We're still kind of in that part, right?
Yeah, bless you.
Solstice here, summer. Yeah, a lot of it has to do with like sun gods, etc. How do you explain that part? It's all so. The way I explain it is, I'm just like it's a mystery religion. What? Go contemplate it. Go sit for a while. What?
Yeah, that's one way. I'm not like super big on a lot of those Wheel of the Year mythos things anymore. I know that when I was a baby pagan, it was it was always sort of the maiden mother crone and the god and goddess grow up together sort of thing, and it's a really effective way to build ritual. But it wasn't there in the ritual of the first witches, so I mean it's kind of a later addition. Also, I mean, I think what's really important is just sort of honoring the Sabbats where you live, and looking at what's in your backyard and making decisions about what you do based on that. Like here in Northern California, spring begins pretty early, like in February for sure. That's when everything turns green and blooms. And then summer is really kind of a time of death more than anything else. And then as fall comes, hopefully you get rain again. So it's, the myths that we create can be very different depending on where we live, I think. And the best thing to do is to tailor the myth to where you are instead of just sort of relying on the ideas of people who live in Great Britain, most specifically, because it's very different when we live in the United States, right? You live in Cleveland. I used to get really mad in Michigan when people would tell me, Imbolc is the start of spring. Fuck no, Imbolc is not the start of spring, right? I mean, Imbolc was the height of winter. It was depressing.
Yeah.
You knew you had another month at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's hard to sort of cookie cutter situation. It's all of that. All right.
Yeah.
So, how many horned gods are there? Have you ever done a count?
That, I think, because it's such a personal sort of question, like what is and what is not a horned god, it really varies from person to person. I think there's probably 30 different deities listed in the book at some points. And then, you can have horned goddesses too. I mean, Hathor is an Egyptian goddess, often depicted with...
Step on my next question.
Often depicted with, cow horns or the face of a cow with horns. So a horned god doesn't necessarily have to be exclusively male. There's also Ellen of the Ways, which is a sort of more modern deity in some ways. but she has reindeer antlers atop her head.
When you say modern deity, what are you saying? I'm not familiar with.
So Ellen is probably what I would call a revealed deity, and there are other deities that are sort of like this. People read things from ancient history and think, wow, there must be a deity here somewhere behind this. Does that make sense? Like you read the Mabinogion, especially, which is mostly stories of heroes and figures from the world of Fae. And it's not really the stories of, people identified as deities. But most people think that there are probably deities behind these figures and that they were Christianized to be heroes because you couldn't have pagan gods running around. And there's a character in there named Helen or Ellen sometimes. And then there's a road in Britain that was used by the Romans, which is over 2,000 years old or so, that had Helen in its name. And in the 80s, a writer named Caroline Wise, she thought that there was a goddess behind that figure in the Mabinogion and the name of the road, and wrote about Ellen of the Ways. And if you go on Amazon today and you type in Ellen of the Ways, you'll find statues, T-shirts, all kinds of things, but nobody had named this goddess before, I think, 1985. Some people would say it's new. I don't like to discount it because obviously it's, she's real, or you wouldn't have statues and T-shirts and stuff.
Yeah, I know Caroline, so I'm going to go chase down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And I'll admit, like when I first kind of, fell, upon the story of Ellen and all that, I was very skeptical, right? Like you can't make up a goddess. There's the mythology, right? Snot. And then you talk to people when you're out at festivals and stuff, and they're wearing Ellen T-shirts, and they tell you about their experiences with Ellen. Yeah. And then somebody in your own coven wants to talk to you about Ellen. Obviously, the deity is real at that point. Whether or not it existed 2,000 years ago is really immaterial to me.
Well, I mean, think about like in really modern kind of ways, like Slender Man, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want nothing to do with that thing. I know it's like something some kid invented on the internet 10 years ago or whatever, but I still keep it away from me. George Lucas and Star Wars. I mean, I'm sure like Darth Vader's rise, fall, rise again is something that people are going to be telling to each other in campfires thousands of years from now. So.
Yeah, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, for sure. You also have like deities like Herne the Hunter wasn't attested to in any written form until 1598, I think, when he shows up in one of Shakespeare's plays.
I thought he only showed up in that BBC series from the 80s. So, when you look at rituals from antiquity, would you consider like maybe a Mithras ritual to be a horned god ritual?
There were bulls involved, right?
Yeah.
So, could be. Mithra was really god of soldiers, though, more than anything else. And if you look at kind of the other gods that we associate with sort of the bigger horned god idea, he doesn't fit very well within that as a soldier god, right? I mean, Pan, god of craziness and wild spaces. Kronos, a god of hunting, which would imply god of wild spaces, so it doesn't fit. However, bulls were central to his worship, which is a horned animal. So, it's that open thing. What is a horn god? Going to vary by person. If somebody were to say, Mithra is a horn god to me, I would say, sure, that's great. But I don't write about him. I don't write about Mithra in the book, though. There's only so many footnotes I can dig up.
So very curious about the art on this book here. Hey, look at this. Laura Tempest Zakroff. What incredible artist. Did she get any kind of direction from you, what you wanted, or did you just say, need a horned god, why don't you just create one?
So I had an idea of what I wanted the cover to look like. I wanted this figure. I wanted
the stang.
I wanted the stang. I wanted the torque. I wanted antlers and not horns. I have a Chrononos painting that she did, which is very similar to this. And to me, when I sort of think of the bigger horned god in my head, it's the figure that I most go to. So I told Llewellyn what I wanted, and I said, can we please have Tempest do the art for the book? And this is the first cover she's ever done for Llewellyn that's not one of her books. So this was a big step for them to let Tempest do the cover. So they have a designer who kind of designed the cover in a kind of a crude form, and then Tempest went in and did the final art on the deity. And she asked me a couple times, like she'd ask me questions like, what do you want this to be? How do you want it to look? What kind of feel do you want from it? Can I put a pentacle on it? She gives him blonde hair, I think, in an ode to me, which was very nice. She didn't really have to do that. So we talked about it a little bit, but Tempest is such a great artist that I think the Horn God really whispers into her ear. Like, I didn't have to tell her very much at all. I mean, this art is stunning too. I love the cover of this book. I think people buy the book mostly because the cover is so good.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So, and I gotta say, this is a great, like, the whole production of this book is like really fantastic. So I want to talk about Pan a bit. So Pan still like exists in our like vernacular, panic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so one thing I've noticed is maybe you don't really want the god's attention.
Sometimes.
See a swan coming running at you, probably want to get out of the way. Panic. We've all had that feeling of panic before. That overwhelming, just a primal fear that comes coursing through your veins. How would you suggest that you work with someone like Pan, without like, kind of destroying your psyche, I guess?
Well, I think when you approach Pan, you have to approach Pan by his rules. And that's first and foremost. The Greeks believed that Pan was a god that existed between civilization and the wild. We like to use the word liminal a lot in modern witchcraft. And Pan was very much a liminal god in that sense. That he liked the comforts of civilization, but he didn't want to be that close to civilization.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, so inviting him like to constantly live at your house maybe isn't the best idea necessarily. Pan was also the god of naps, so he would get very angry if you awoke him from his nap. So there are certain times of day when actively calling Pan into ritual are not advised. And then it's important, I think, to look at Pan's mythology, which is not rosy. It's not all nice. I mean, a lot of the mythology is about chasing nymphs, and it's about raping nymphs, right? It's not good. Like when your lover says, I think you should draw down Pan tonight, and you've never worked with Pan, that seems like a very bad idea to me. That maybe you should have a relationship with the god before trying anything like that, because I think those less positive attributes are still a part of the god. Panic is really interesting when it comes to Pan. So the word panic actually derives directly from his name, and it was something that Pan was said to give other people. Like if you were an invading army and you were coming into Greece, Pan would get your army to have a panic terror where it would turn on itself, and your left flank would suddenly be fighting your right flank in the dark because you couldn't communicate with each other and you didn't know that you were slaughtering your friend next to you, right? And that was Pan's sort of revenge for breaking the tranquility of the wilderness by bringing something like civilization into it, which is what an organized army is. But if you look at Pan's rituals in the dark, in the middle of the night, when you're in one of Pan's grottos, you're in this dimly lit cave, and everybody's drinking and there's music playing, and perhaps if the ritual is the right one, everybody's naked and having a really good time. The women who were there were said to make a strange noise called a krug, and the krug kind of sounds like really weird. So if you were to imagine this sort of kind of sexual energy, this weird sound being put around, heavy drinking, lots and lots of dancing, kind of almost in a trance, you might find yourself kind of in a panic a little bit because it's such a strange place. And I think because of that, panic can probably be used to commune with the God. Like when we're scared, we're in an altered state of consciousness, which is one of the reasons I think we like being scared as people. And when we're in altered states of consciousness, whether it's through booze or mushrooms or just through the power of ritual, we're more open to things. And I think that panic was one of the ways that people could use to get in touch with Pan.
Interesting. Yeah, I've thought about, I think it was a Coil record where on the cover of it they actually talk about Pan and the relationship to panic. And I remember some heady days staring at the album cover being like, ooh, I get it. So there was, so my absolute favorite energy of all of it is the Green Man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to me, the Green Man, like, that's my idealized self. I would way rather be in the woods at all times. Every once in a while, I'd pop up on a Christian church just to, like, stir things up a little bit. What are your thoughts on the relationship between the Green Man and the Horned God?
So the Green Man gets a whole chapter in the book because I think it's such an important figure. But the Green Man really is this sort of weird mystery that's never been adequately explained by anyone. You know, the sort of heyday of Green Man figures is about 1200 to 1500 of the Common Era, which is really, really late if it's a pagan survival. However, there are images that look like some Green Man images in pagan antiquity. There's a version of Dionysus that looks kind of Green Man-ish, I think from the 3rd century. And as early as the 4th century, Christians are using a Green Man image on a tomb. And so no one really knows what it means. One of the problems with Green Man images is that they're very, very different. You know, there are some that, if you look at them on a church wall, are absolutely terrifying to look at. They're not positive, really. And then you'll see some where it really does kind of remind you of our modern interpretation of the Green Man. There's a smile on his face. It's his eyes peering up to you through green leaves, not decayed leaves. And it suggests the idea of something in nature or communing with nature in a way. A lot of scholars think that the green men in churches might have been used to represent the decay of the body, which would be a punishment for sin because you're not allowed into heaven. They could be souls stuck in purgatory. It could represent the temptations of the earth in some way. And then there are the positive green men, which might represent life and love and the power of the natural world. You know, one of the problems with Christianity is it doesn't have a lot of ways to express ideas. Jesus and Yahweh are pretty limited in what they can express. They certainly don't express anything having to do with the natural world. So in certain instances, the Green Man could be a substitute for that. The term Green Man is relatively modern. It really wasn't used until 1939 when Lady Ragland, who was a part of the minor nobility in the UK, wrote an article for the Folklore Association over there, and she decided that foliate heads or grotesques, as green men had previously been called, they were called foliate heads because a lot of them have foliage coming out of the mouth. If you look at a lot of images, you'll see that, like leaves or vines coming straight from the mouth, which I think probably suggests decay and things growing around the body. Anyway, she said that the grotesques or foliate heads were representative of an ancient pagan deity, which was an idea that she took from Margaret Murray. But she used the term green man. And in the 50s, there was an architect who wrote like a series of books about England's greatest architectural marvels. And he wrote a lot about churches, and he used that term green man. And then he described those images as pagan pre-Christian images that had survived. They did use the term green man in England before Lady Ragland, but it was generally meant something like Robin Hood. And if you saw the word green man, it was most often on a tavern, because branches and leaves were used to represent alcohol is sold here. So that's where you and I would have been heading, after our interview back then. We would have gone to the Green Man Inn. And then in Tudor and Stuart courts, they used to have people dress up in costumes with branches and leaves on them and beat each other with clubs. And I think the idea was to represent drunkenness in some way. So the term is old, used to describe the heads is new. However, in my own life, when I go to the UK, I look for green man like crazy. Like if there's a church, I'm running in and I'm going to Google green man usually just to make sure there's one in there. Yep. And they're usually not very big. Their images are usually pretty small. Like at Rosslyn on the inside of the chapel, the most famous green man image there is about that big. And I remember like being so frustrated that I couldn't find it, because you expect it to be, this big image, right? And it's not. And my wife's like, you idiot, it's right there. It's on the map. It's right there. But it's supposed to be bigger, wife. It's supposed to be bigger. And in my own practice too, we do rituals with the green man, because we really do feel like the green man today, when we call that power, is the soul of nature, is that figure that you commune with when you go out in the woods and you feel peace and serenity. So despite its rather strange origins, I certainly like worship the green man like a lot of other, witches and pagans out there for sure.
So my absolute favorite green man that we have here is the last time I saw Ray, our founder, to everybody tuning in here, our founder, Raymond Buckland. The last time I saw him, he was like, Stephen, I need you to come out and see me. So I drove out to rural Ohio, and he gave me this beautiful piece to bring back to the museum. It is a depiction of the Green Man, and he told me the story that when he had his museum in Long Island, somebody had taken the tour, saw his like Green Man depictions, and then they were driving past the funeral parlor, and they had been to a funeral there. They knew that there was architectural elements of the Green Man on the building. They were tearing it down, and they pulled over, borrowed a wheelbarrow, rolled it over to Ray's house, left it in his driveway.
That's great.
Yeah. One day you're going to come visit us, and I'll be like, and that is the last day I hung out with Raymond Buckland. And I'll point that out to you. So, really beautiful piece, but, just something that ties it all together for our guests here. When they come in, I get to share the story about the last time I got to hang out with Ray. The Green Man meant a lot to Ray. The foliage faces.
One of the things I really love about the Green Man too is if you go to the UK or even just you can do it online. You can look up churches that have Green Man, and they're like always really proud of this, and they'll often say, and then there's this pagan symbol of a Green Man in our church, and they're not embarrassed by it. They are like overjoyed that they have this figure in their church. So it's really cool how much the Green Man figure has been embraced by modern churches, and not embraced for whatever reason it might have meant 500 or 600 or 700 years ago, but embraced for the reasons that we honor the Green Man as this soul of nature.
So I can never remember what it's called, but there is there's another, what is it? The Shaman, it's a goddess image where they're opening up their vaginas.
The Sheila and the Dig.
Yeah.
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 Which I'm always more excited when I find those.
Those are harder to find.
Yeah.
I think they're more prevalent in Ireland than they are.
I've never seen one out in the wild, but I've always like. I would get a kick out of that.
I would make my wife. Well, I wouldn't make her. Hopefully, she would choose to pose next to one of those images, and that would be the picture that I would want, right?
Yeah. So the Green Man, I don't know. It's I think it's something that really resonates with us because I think us as people, we need to spend more time outdoors. And, just by looking at a Green Man image, I think we're reminded about that at all times. So.
One of the biggest arguments, and this has been made before, like by Ronald Hutton and other historians, but it's in my book too, is a lot of the ideas that we use when we talk about the horned god really come from 19th century Romantic and Victorian poetry.
Oh, yeah.
Those writers felt as if they were separated from the outdoors. That they were writing about...
They were separated from the outdoors.
They felt disconnected.
Us now?
Yeah, more so than us now. They felt disconnected from nature. I think a lot of that is because there's this huge sea change in British society in over 100 years where that goes from an agricultural society, 80% living in an agricultural area, to 100 years later, 80% living in urban environments, right? So that's a huge change in how people live. And they wanted to sort of write about the English countryside in a poetic and romantic way. And they chose the great god Pan as their entryway into that world. And to this day, like when we worship the horned god and we talk about the horned god as the soul of nature and stuff, we're really sort of mimicking some of those poets who were the first to really write about Pan in such a way.
No. So Christopher Hughes says, we love the cash of having old pagan stuff in our midst in the UK. We bet you do love that because us here in America, we don't have that sort of thing laying around.
Not very much, that's for sure.
But enjoy it, and hopefully we'll travel soon and we can go enjoy it with you.
Yeah, you all were going to go to the UK this July originally, right?
Yeah.
Right. I was going to hitchhike. I was going to hitchhike and follow you.
Yeah.
Around.
I was going to go see my mom in Sweden too. No, maybe next year.
We still have plans for September of this year. We have our fingers crossed. We'll see.
All right. So I thought you were not, but maybe you are.
It's still on our calendar. My wife has a shadow trip to Greece planned because they are accepting Americans if the UK does not let us in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She's determined to get off the continent this September.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I hope you come visit us here in Cleveland sometime soon. I know that you're working on a certain book. How's that coming along?
So I'm not quite really started the Buckland book because I've one before that. The Greek Gods book that I'm working on.
What is it?
The Witch's Guide to the Greek Gods.
Oh, okay.
Which should be done by the end of summer, and then it's full steam ahead into the Buckland book. I was talking to somebody the other day about maybe visiting in August, so I can't rule it out yet for 2021. I still might get to Cleveland, but I'm scared. I'm scared to go to the Midwest in the winter though, because I used to live there. So like after November 15th, it's out. I'm too weak now living in California. I just can't deal with it. I don't have a coat that heavy. I just don't own one.
Yeah, the trouble is August is really busy for me. And when you're here, I'm kind of need to like babysit you a little bit and be like, all right, here's these piles. These are these things, So keep that in mind.
Maybe March then. Maybe we'll have to do March.
March would actually be perfect for me.
Yeah, maybe that's...
It's before things get crazy here, tourist season and all that. And it's also, the weather is very unpredictable, which I like, I love living in the Midwest for that reason. You know, it's like every day is an adventure. But I live about
I miss it in the
drive
fall.
here.
I miss it in the fall. I miss kind of the cold days in the fall. I miss the turning of the leaves and stuff. I mean, we get that, but they don't turn very bright colors and they don't really fall until November. So I miss that part of it, but
yeah,
I don't miss January or February. I mean, that's the big kicker.
I don't know. I kind of like them. It keeps me level.
In my advanced age, shoveling snow seems like too much.
Oh yeah, I know. My advanced age, everything seems too much. Oh.
Yeah.
So Chris Hughes says, not that Chris Hughes. Well, we still like you.
Are you so Chris, are you living in the UK now again? So, I'll just have a conversation with Chris as we go through this.
Well, they insist that it's not that Chris Hughes. So who knows?
Well, it's Christopher Hughes. So this Chris used to write at Pathos.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes, and I would put in there like bio, not that Chris Hughes, because people would get confused with Christopher Hughes in Wales, and they often were writing about some of the same topics. So that it was confusing for some people. I always loved it. I always thought that was really funny. Not that Chris Hughes.
And they say no, sadly. This is truly an asymmetrical conversation that we're having here.
We're getting there. It's all good.
Yeah. So, all right. So Pan dies, gets reborn. Does he stay dead? We have, with the horned gods, we have a god of the underworld. Now, is that where all the Hades, hell, Satan stuff comes from?
To me, the horned god is a god of the dead, but not because of anything having to do with Satan or anything. It's really having to do with Kronos in the ancient world, who was probably a god of death. There's an interesting artifact called the Ream Stela, and on top of the roof of the stela, which is like depicted as sort of a temple, there's a rat, and rats were symbols of death. So that it's right above Kronos' head is very telling. Also, Kronos is often surrounded by things having to do with the earth, like coins and snakes. And those were also things associated with gods like Hades sometimes, because if you're going to have metal, you have to dig it up from the earth, right? So it kind of is associated with death. And then Gerald Gardner, when he writes about the horned god in his books in 54 and 59, he writes about the horned god as a god of death and a god of life. So he's got like one hoof in this world and one hoof in the next world, and kind of stands between the gates, of life and death. Certainly, there's a lot of stories of gods dying and being reborn, especially sort of in modern pagan circles and rituals. For me, though, those are great stories, and I've done some great rituals where we've used that. But to me, the horned god always kind of stands in both places at the same time. If he's a god of nature, which is a place of life and also death, because you can't have new life without death, he exists in both of those places and fills both of those functions. There is a great story about, it's not really great, it's kind of sad story about Pan dying, like in the year, like at the beginning and then the first century of the Common Era.
But that's a mistranslation, right?
Nobody's exactly sure what that story means. Some people think that the god that the river pilot heard. So the story is that this river pilot is taking people to a place, and the place names don't add up very well. Like they go by an island, and nobody's been able to figure out what island this is. And somebody yells from the island to the pilot of the boat, "Tell people the great god Pan is dead." And everybody's like, whoa, what the hell, right? Like Pan doesn't die. And they get very, very scared. And then the pilot is addressed again, tell everyone the great god Pan is dead. And then the people leave the boat and they share this story. And it gets back to one of the Roman emperors who goes and investigates to figure out what's going on. But the story is kind of weird, though, because people still were worshiping Pan after that. There were still statues and frescoes and things made to Pan. And then, of course, later on, when the gods are sort of reborn during the Renaissance, Pan comes right along with the rest of them. So if Pan has a rebirth, I think he really has a rebirth in the 19th century in England, where he becomes this god that is the most written about god in all of the English language for a short period of time.
Short period of time, but I don't know. People love Pan. Pan is I talked about Pan being around when I was a little kid. Still around to this day. It's hard to escape his gaze.
Well, Pan wasn't really written about until the 1800s. And then by 1920, all of a sudden, he's the most written about god in all of English literature. Yeah. With hundreds of years of English literature, for a god to consume people so completely that they needed to write about him, and they wrote about him as the soul of nature, but they also wrote about him as the libido of women. Like when women wanted to write about sexual urges, they used Pan as a way to do that. And of course, gay poets wrote about Pan because gay sex has always been very important to Pan. So he was a natural to use when writing about that. Stamp and pipe in me, great Pan, is one of my favorite little pieces of poem from I think the late 19th century, where you really couldn't say what you wanted to say. So you had to kind of get around it. Crowley's Hymn to Pan is like that too. So he still might be the most written about God in all of English literature. I'm not really sure because I don't think anybody's done a survey in a while. But, to go from being sort of this afterthought or used as the butt of a joke, which is what he was used a lot as in earlier literature in England, to go for then all of a sudden, boom, to explode and be everywhere is really pretty amazing.
So any connections between horn gods and trickster gods?
There's some cool stories about Pan being a trickster.
Yeah.
He tried to trick the goddess of the moon into making love to him by taking the wool of a virgin sheep and making a cloak out of it and then putting it over top of him. And so when the moon saw herself reflected in the sheep's wool, she came down because it was so beautiful and wanted to make love to it. And then, Pan jumps out, right? And it's a really good instance of Pan being clever.
They were easily fooled back then, weren't they?
Yes, I guess.
I don't know. I have to say that I'm very nervous with this season of Loki coming around. I have too many guests that come in that they think in their head that they're some kind of avatar of trickster gods, and they just wind up being jerks and causing trouble with the way I run things here at the museum. This is a museum of order. And chances are you are not an avatar of a trickster god. You're probably just a jerk. So just back off.
You are not as charming as Tom Hiddleston. Please leave.
Exactly. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Loki's a fascinating story because, people think that we really know the myths of the Norse gods, and they were all written down by Christians. We really don't know. I'm guessing that Loki was probably much more benign in the original stories because there's enough, attestments to him being there. And if he was such a negative deity, it seems strange that he would be there in such roles. I don't know. I've had some weird Loki experiences over the years.
Yeah.
So I've sympathy for him.
All I'm saying is if you think that you're some kind of avatar of a trickster god, chances are you're not. Please stay away from me. Because all that winds up doing is causing me trouble.
You could write self-proclaimed gods of mischief not welcome outside the museum.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Just like my attention shoplifters, this museum is protected by a 1,000-year curse. Ray Buckland, 429-17. So, little pieces of protection that we have all around here.
Well, you gotta defend the homeland, right? You gotta take care of stuff.
Well, yeah. I mean, kind of look out for my own, like, it can be stressful, when people come in and they're like, yeah, man.
It is kind of crazy. Like, we're in a big witch moment right now, right? I mean, there's like a lot of witch media. Witches are all over, social media, but they're also in pop culture in a big prominent way. And then, of course, at the same time, you have things like Loki and whatever else. And you sort of wonder what the repercussions for our greater community are long term with such things.
So, do you see an ebb coming anytime soon?
I think eventually, like, if you look at witch bubbles over the years, they peak and then they go back down. I mean, we had a witch bubble in the mid '90s.
Yeah.
When the craft came out, and then it was kind of a slow 10 years, and then the witch bubble came again. Probably about 2016, and it hasn't like stopped yet. It keeps kind of going up, which is really different. But I think eventually it'll be vampires or zombies or something else, and there'll be less witch TV shows, and probably some of the social media infatuation with witchcraft will ebb. But, people have a tendency to make fun of like new witches. And I mean, I think we've always seen that in our community.
Yeah.
In the 90s with fluffy bunnies and stuff. But for me, anything that empowers other people is a good thing. And that's how witchcraft is mostly being used today, to empower people. And I think that's good. Whether or not it looks exactly like my witchcraft is really immaterial. It doesn't matter. As long as it helps people get through their day, I think that's fantastic.
I absolutely agree. And the thing is, here we get all sorts of like people get upset. They come in, they realize our museum was founded by a Wiccan. They're not Wiccan. They want to come in, they want to be like, make sure that they point out that their ideas of witchcraft and this. But we're open to all sorts of like witchcraft here. Though we do begin the museum kind of like framed through like raised lens of what witchcraft is, and then we go from there. But anything that makes life easier for my guests to get through their day, I have absolutely zero qualms about that.
The sort of wicked backlash is really interesting to me. And it's also kind of tragic because, I mean, the Wiccans were really important to bring witchcraft into the public sphere and to make it something that was acceptable, where you don't lose your children because of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who are really negative about Wicca are doing rituals that look like Wicca.
See,
right?
That's the thing that I'm always like the Kermit the Frog drinking the tea. And you and I'm pretty sure we've discussed this, but I know that we come from the same headspace, that it's like, oh, I'm so quick to follow the Wiccan wheel of the year, but I want nothing to do with Wicca, And it's like, well, I don't know, kind of seems like a Wiccan thing here.
You're casting
whatever, I don't know.
You're casting a circle, calling the four quarters, invoking deity, doing a working, whether seasonal or magical in the middle, finishing with cakes and wine or cakes and ale. That's really what Wicca is. It's a ritual system. And it's just so strange that it's become this thing to really hate on. I get that. I get the fact that Wicca and witchcraft were used as synonyms for a long time. And there are people who kind of don't like that, and I get that. I mean, Wicca is not the only kind of witchcraft. It is a kind of witchcraft. Yeah. But to piss on everything, it's sad because we have so much more in common than we do in difference.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I don't know. It's I like to have a place. Tony likes to have a place. We like to have a place where it's pretty much just, if you have an interest in anything like this, please, we have something for you here.
Yeah. I love other witchcrafts that aren't Wicca. I like the traditional witchcraft, which is big right now. Some of those ritual techniques are fantastic. I love the history of it. I love some of the things that they embrace in it. And I'm completely open to it. I don't understand why we have to be antagonistic towards one another about this stuff. We're all just trying to do the best we can.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, what's going on with you these days? Anything exciting?
I'm looking forward to doing stuff again. California opened up a few last week, I guess.
Yeah.
And most of us are still wearing masks as we go about, but a little less so than usual.
One thing I would say, hey, if you show up here, let's keep wearing masks. It gets close quarters in there.
Right.
I understand that I don't want to wear a mask. Guess what? I don't want to wear a mask. But
no, nobody does.
Yeah, masks are... but, in the end, we all wear masks, Jason. But you're coming in here, you're getting in really close quarters. I've really thought about this quite a bit. If I get a cold, I have to close. I don't want to get a cold right now. I have, a lot of catching up to do here as a business. So let's wear a mask so I don't get a cold and I don't get COVID. So...
It would be nice if we all kind of wore masks in the winter going forward in a lot of spaces. Right?
Yeah. And they're very cozy.
Yeah, you go to the mall around Yule, you wear a mask so you're not spreading stuff. But opening things is exciting. I mean, I've got a few pagan events on the calendar in October. Nothing before that, but it'll be nice to get back out on the road and do stuff. It's so long.
I think I saw that you're going to go see Led Zeppelin.
I hope so. They originally were supposed to play at the end of July. Now they're playing in August, so I don't know the dates. But I have tickets to Green Day and Weezer already.
All right.
That same week, Black Crowes play, and then Guns N' Roses, and then Green Day, Weezer. It could be one of the best weeks of my life. I
finally went to the movies last night. I went to see Sparks, the Sparks Brothers documentary.
That's right.
And that was being able to go to a movie and just enjoy it was really kind of huge for me. So
I have tickets to Fast 9 Thursday night.
Oh, geez. So, wow. You just brought something in my head I haven't thought of in years. When I first moved to Cleveland, I was working for a company I used to work for before this. And my first gig there, before I crawled up the corporate ladder, was answering phones during the holiday season. And what's the actor's name that died? Paul Watkins or something?
Oh, yeah. Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. Yeah, not Paul Watkins. But Paul Walker dies, and this guy turns to me and goes, "I always remember I was with you on the day that Paul Walker died." And I said, "Who's that?" And then he spent the next 2 hours recreating every favorite Fast and the Furious scene that Paul Walker was in. And I felt like I actually knew him by the end.
It's kind of embarrassing that I like the Fast and the Furious movies, I'll admit that. But they're really, they've progressed to this point where they're really just superheroes in cars.
Okay.
And, they're doing, crazy car stunts. And it's made for big screens.
Yeah.
Ridiculous and dumb fun, and it has Ludacris and Tyrese Gibson in it, and I love those two guys. So I mean, that's why I watch these movies.
Yeah.
But my wife is horrified that I do watch these movies. She does not go with me.
I'm sure Jillian doesn't really always want to go see the movies I want to go see.
Yeah.
But I drag her along anyway.
Ari's like, "You'll find somebody else to go with you, won't you?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, there'll be other people."
Yeah. So California's opening up. Cleveland's opening up. I don't know if I'm going to go to any concerts this summer. I think there was some Mozart from the Cleveland Museum of Art that I wanted to see. But other than that, all it was shows, concerts from last year I didn't want to see last year. So I'm looking forward to 2022 for a fresh concert experience for me.
I don't know, it was hard. The last 15 months have been hard. I did not realize how much I liked other human beings.
Yeah.
So I am pretty excited about going back out and doing things. And concerts are going to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But it will be weird. I mean,
what's life without music, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, sitting in a restaurant right now, indoors, with other people nearby is still very, very novel and strange.
I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sitting here in the museum with people.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for like a year and a half, and it's been about a year, and it's been very intense, you know.
Jason's office is not a place where visitors go, so
Yeah.
it's been very lonely here in this spot, you know.
Yeah, I bet. Louis, I mean, I've been really. It's everybody that comes into the museum's really pretty rad, you know.
Yeah.
Like people that come in are usually pretty much the coolest people that come through Cleveland. And
witches are the best people. Right?
Yeah, witches are the best people. People interested in witchcraft that aren't witches, they're the second of the best people. And it just kind of like goes from there. So I feel very blessed that I've been able to spend time with people the last year and a half, because I'm a social person, though I pretend like I'm not.
Yeah, witches, druids, ceremonial magicians, people interested in witchcraft, other people. That's how it goes.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, so you may come see us sometime. We have to go through Ray's collection of like ephemera and things like that.
Yeah.
Get a hold of me if you just need me to send off scan of this or that. I've met a couple people that actually went to Ray's original museum.
Wow.
And, you know, you got to talk to a guy named Dan that lives out in like Buffalo or Rochester. Interesting guy. He was part of the whole milieu back then. He comes in here every once in a while. Truly fascinating individual. He knew them all.
That's perfect, because I got to go to Lilydale, because, I mean, that's a part of Ray's story, right? Going up there, talking to the spiritualists.
Oh.
I wasn't far from there.
So my assistant here at the museum, Cara, has a really wonderful video that she filmed at Lilydale, like probably about like 10 years ago. And it's her just being like, hey, YouTubers, we're here at Lilydale. It's awesome. Oh, my gosh. The vanity plate on that red Corvette.
Yeah.
Buckland. That's Raymond Buckland's Corvette. Oh, my gosh. And it's amazing.
I was there in 2012, and I did not see Ray, but I did see his Corvette with the Buckland license plate, and I took like 3 pictures of it, and then my phone promptly died. But I got the pictures before my phone died, which was really the most important thing.
Yeah.
But he's also in the Dead Speak at Lilydale documentary.
He is, yeah.
If people have never seen that, it's probably on HBO Max now if they stream that. And like you watch it and you're like, what is this? And then Ray comes on. And Ray is so cool, so empathetic. You can tell he has real gifts. It's like my wife and I, like our jaws dropped when we were watching this. It was just so cool to see Mr. Buckland right there.
So, yeah, that's great. I think the one. So we have things that, you know, like we're adding to the collection. I think the favorite thing that I personally sought out to get was a print from Shannon Taggart, who's a well-known photographer in Lilydale. She takes photos of like spiritualists, etc. And it's a print from a seance in Lilydale. And Ray is at a seance. And he's looking at the medium with astonishment, where you could tell he's just like, whoa, this is getting cool. And it's in our little spiritualist section here at the museum. So,
to me, Lilydale's like this American treasure, right? That people don't know about. I mean,
it is. And anybody that's listening towards the dregs and the tail end of our conversation here, and you don't know about Lilydale, Google it, go visit them. I can't imagine that last year was any good for Lilydale. I know that they're open for business this year. Go to Lilydale. I think I'm trying to go to Shannon Taggart's conference at the end of July there.
Ooh, I know I need to go. Maybe I'll follow you there. That would be fun.
Yeah. I think that's important Shannon Taggart and her work's important. My friend Susan Aberth, a great scholar, is going to be there. So yeah, everybody watching this, listening, let's meet in Lilydale at the end of July.
Yeah, Thorn Mooney's supposed to go with me to Lilydale. So we've been talking about that. And she's pretty awesome if you've never talked to Thorn.
Oh, we had Thorn at the old museum.
Yeah, she's great.
Previous location. She needs to come see us here at this one. So, is there a reason why that you want to go to Lilydale with Thorn, or is it just?
Thorn's just awesome. Like when I told her I was going to write the Buckland biography, she's like, "Can I go on research trips with you?"
Oh.
And I was like, "Of course." And Thorn knows as much about the history of all this stuff as anybody else. I mean, she's so well informed, such a great writer, such a great person in our greater community. I adore Thorn.
Yeah, I think Thorn's somebody that's going to be remembered long.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jason, I have to say thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us here at the Buckle Museum, our live chat. I am such a huge fan of this book here, The Horned God of the Witches, because you know what? The goddess is great. The horned god is great as well. Jason, I'll be right back. All right, so everybody that tuned in, thank you so much for watching us ramble out about horned gods and other delights. So I keep mentioning it, the Horned God of the Witches book. It is now available in my gift shop as well as pretty much all over the internet, etc. Go to your don't go to Amazon. Go to your local bookseller and buy the damn thing. Amazon just wants to destroy everyone's way of life. Also, if you like horned gods, you probably like Baphomet. Order your Baphomet t-shirt design from bucklemuseum.org. Help support the museum that way. All right, I'm going to cut out. I don't think I have any live streams scheduled anytime soon, but I always forget things. So who knows what's coming up. I don't know. I guess this is the part where I'm like, subscribe, click the bell, you be you. Buy your tickets on our website, bucklemuseum.org. Come see me. I'd really like to see you. All right. Well, we got one last comment here. It's a blank comment. So, all right, we're going to end it with that. All right, stay witchy, my friends.